Hi everyone, this is Dr. Nitin Chhoda, and in this training video I'm going to talk about a promising and interesting new policy idea. It's called the Job Losers Stimulus Program, and I'm going to answer the question, is this the new alternative to the $600 per week federal booster? Now, I have talked about this in other training videos where the Republicans want to do away with the $600 per week federal booster in favor of a back to work bonus, and the Democrats want to be able to expand that booster, extend that booster, and enable a whole lot more individuals to qualify for the stimulus payment. In this training video, I'm going to talk about three things. The first are the White House concerns about the $600 per week federal booster. The second is my personal position about this, because I do believe human lives are at stake here. And number three, I'm going to talk about a promising new alternative, the Job Losers Stimulus Program. And now this is a policy idea that blends the best of the Democratic and the Republican ideas, and it offers a new promising idea, new potential for an approach that could potentially make sense in this complex scenario. Now, I've done many training videos on my channel on stimulus checks, on managing your money, on unemployment benefits, on remote work, how you can find new job opportunities. And I can tell you that unemployment benefits is a topic that really cuts deep for all of us. It creates an emotional reaction. It triggers an emotional response in all of us, because it's such an intense topic, and it's really something that all of us have strong, passionate opinions about. I can tell you right at the outset of this video that my position is individuals who need help the most should get unemployment benefits, should get more unemployment benefits, and individuals who have the opportunity to go back to work in a safe manner should be able to go back to work. But the fundamental problem with our unemployment system is that the moment you get a job, you're no longer eligible for unemployment. And now, because of the $600 per week federal booster, it creates a complex scenario where an individual does not or may not want to go back to work because they're making more money on unemployment, which exactly, and on top of that, by the way, is a safety aspect, because individuals don't feel safe about going back to work, which is a valid concern. So these are the issues that make this a very complex subject, and I want you to know that I'm in favor of individuals who need the help. But as far as policies go, the Republicans want to do away, based on the science from the White House, the Republicans want to do away with the $600 per week federal booster, and the Democrats want to be able to extend that $600 per week federal booster. As far as I'm concerned, I'm a concerned citizen with my YouTube channel. My goal is to educate, and I'm happy to be able to bring this information to you so you can make your own informed decision about this subject. So I analyzed an article from the Washington Center for Equitable Growth. This is a non-profit research and grant-making organization that is dedicated to advancing evidence-backed ideas. In other words, ideas that are backed by scientific rationale, by proof, by research studies. And it promotes policies that encourage strong, stable, and broad-based economic growth. Now, this article that you see on your screen here, moving from federal pandemic unemployment compensation to a job losers stimulus program, by the way, that's the name of the program, Job Losers Stimulus Program, amid the pandemic. This is a fascinating article that was written by Iona Marinescu. Iona Marinescu, and I'm going to call her Professor Marinescu because she's the assistant professor of economics at the University of Pennsylvania. Now, I'm going to refer to her as professor for the rest of this video. The professor is an economist who studies the labor market, and she creates policies that improve employment, productivity, and economic security. So I'm going to link to the article below. I think it's a fascinating article, and I would encourage you to take the time to read the entire article so you can understand the scope and the depth of the research that went in. It's an excellent article that I believe should be adopted by the administration. I think that someone in the White House or a decision maker should see this article and should give it some serious consideration. In fact, if you agree with me after you watch this video and after you click the link below and check out the article, I strongly encourage you to talk to your local representative and tell them that you support this article. Every single phone call, every single outreach matters. You have more power than you think. So in this article, the professor talks about the problem, she talks about her proposed solution, and then she talks about the big idea, which is encouraging and helping people to actually get back to work as quickly as possible. And she actually provides some scenarios as to how this will work in the real world. So here's the problem right now. over 20 million individuals are still unemployed based on the recent data that came out. Now, it's quite likely that the actual unemployment number is not only higher, but is likely to get worse with time. Now, there would need to be, by some estimates, 9 months of job growth similar to what we saw in the May jobs report for the economy to return to pre-pandemic levels. In other words, we have a long way to go before we can get back to the normal that we knew before the pandemic came along. Now, the $600 per week federal booster, and we can call it enhanced unemployment, we can call it the federal booster plus, which is what economic advisor Larry Kudlow referred to it as. This is scheduled to end in the end of July. Now, the problem is, if this enhanced unemployment aid ends, and that also coincides with businesses running out of the Paycheck Protection Program money, whatever loans they took out, and on top of that, individuals run out of stimulus money, that could be a pretty bad situation for the economy in the end of July, in August, and in September. In fact, Americans could cut spending significantly during August and September, and this could cause another wave of job losses, because guess what? If you don't go out there and spend, then the grocery store that you go to, or the place that you go to eat, or any other place that you go to now doesn't have that much business. They would then end up cutting jobs. So it's going to create a chain reaction, which the government and the Treasury is trying to avoid at all costs, which, by the way, is why the Federal Reserve has cut interest rates down to 0 for the next 2 years. So what is the Job Losers Stimulus Program, which is a policy idea that has been proposed by the professor in this article? Now, keep in mind, this is not technically a proposal because it hasn't yet been promoted in Congress, or it hasn't become something that the Senate is looking at closely yet. So at this point, I'm going to call it a policy idea. Hopefully, this becomes a proposal and some version of this becomes law. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, because this is a pretty good policy idea. So what is the policy idea from the professor? The policy idea would pay $600 a week to workers who have lost their jobs for about 4 months, and this is the key, regardless of whether they get their job back or not. This is the important part. This means that if this policy was to get adopted and that person got $600 a week for 4 months, that individual, even if they got their job back at the 2nd month, 3rd month, or 4th month, would continue to get the $600 a week. Now, before you jump to conclusions, hear me out. Please watch this video all the way to the end, and you'll start to understand why this makes a whole lot of sense. The big reason is that if someone is on unemployment benefits, they, in a sense, have a disincentive to get back to work, because when they get back to work, their unemployment, $600 per week unemployment federal booster, stops. But what this policy idea proposes is that continues, so that an individual now who gets back to work is financially in an even stronger position, and also because they know that that's going to run out no matter what, they will somehow get incentivized to get back to work before the 4 months is up. So this now becomes a 4-month sort of moving target for each individual, as opposed to a hard line in the sand, which is the end of July, which is the current end to the unemployment federal booster. So as you can see, that the 31st of July is creating a lot of anxiety for individuals, because let's say you file for unemployment in August, based on the current law, you wouldn't get the $600 per week federal booster. But if this policy idea became, or some version of it became a reality, you would get unemployment benefits, an additional $600 per week on top of your normal unemployment for 4 months for all of us. And then even if you found a job during those 4 months, you would still continue to get it. This is quite significant if you understand how different it is from a traditional unemployment scenario. And the reason we should do something unusual is because this is an unusual world. This is in many ways a desperate time, and desperate times call for innovative measures like this. So according to this policy idea, the Job Losers Stimulus Program would keep unemployment benefits intact during a time of fragile economic recovery, and also remove any perceived disincentive to return to work, which has been caused by the enhanced unemployment benefits, which is a concern from the Republicans, which has been clearly stated by the Treasury Secretary and the White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow. So what's the big idea behind the Job Losers Stimulus Program? This is basically an unconditional payment of $600 a week for right around 4 months, regardless of whether an individual is employed or not. Now think about this. If that pressure was released from you that, well, if I get a job, I'm going to lose my unemployment benefits, so should I even look for a job? Or should I say no to my job? What are the implications for me if I say no to my job? What if that stress was completely lifted away from you, was completely released from you. This unconditional payment of $600 a week for 4 months, according to this article, will significantly impact American families. In particular, it will lead to better child education, better health outcomes, and overall lower stress levels. In fact, the article says, compared to only providing higher unemployment benefits to the unemployed, the Job Loser Stimulus Program has twin benefits of providing greater support to workers who have been affected by the pandemic, while also modestly increasing overall employment. Now, in all fairness, the exact size of the impact of this new policy idea is difficult to predict, but they did do a simple policy simulation when they were writing this article, and they showed that this kind of an idea could increase the amount of stimulus by 34%. In other words, individuals get a whole lot more money, and it will allow an additional 6% of workers to return to the workforce. In other words, it will lead 6% of those individuals to come back and get employed within 4 months of losing their job. So the bottom line is people will get more help. The help will be unconditional as per this policy idea. It will not be tied to whether you get back to work or not. You get it. So essentially you're stress-free for that period of time, as opposed to sort of an arbitrary deadline of July 31st, which is going to be more than enough for some people, which is going to be not enough for others, and which is going to be absolutely unfair for a whole bunch of people who are still waiting for their unemployment benefits, or who have not applied for unemployment yet because they just didn't expect to get any benefits. So you can see that this becomes essentially a moving target, an unconditional policy idea that does make sense for a lot of individuals, that will lead to, in the article, better child education and also better health outcomes. It would lead to individuals being less stressed, potentially less sicker. The policy idea is projected to increase jobs and raise gross domestic product by increasing consumer demand, because people would essentially have more money. It would be unconditional, which would then put them in a frame of mind where they're now able to go out and spend the money. This is especially important as consumer demand is slowing during this pandemic. I have done another training video on how the American consumer is starting to reduce their spending and is now starting to save more. On the one hand, this is excellent for us. And by the way, I'm a big fan of individuals saving more and avoiding unnecessary expenses. But then on the other hand, spending some amount of money is what's needed to keep the economy moving, to keep our overall standard of life going. Another aspect of this policy idea is that more people would be able to return to work faster. According to the article, the Job Loser Stimulus Program would also have positive effects on the US labor market, allowing workers to return to work when the economy can safely reopen without losing precious income. Now, this part is extremely important. Now, instead of taking away these economic benefits from workers when the economic recovery is fragile, the Job Loser Stimulus Program would allow them to keep the benefits at a time when they need it the most, and it will allow them to continue earning some money, some income when they're unemployed and even when they get their job, because let's say they get their job within that 4-month window, they would now be able to earn income from the job, and they would also continue to receive that $600 per week. Now, this, by the way, would eliminate the need to end the $600 per week federal booster. This would also eliminate the need to have a back to work bonus. But the problem is, how would something like this actually be implemented? Because what about all those millions of individuals who are on unemployment, whose $600 per week federal booster is scheduled to end? They are certainly not going to be able to qualify because they've already received unemployment benefits. But what about other individuals who are applying now? Should they get it? But then it creates the problem that, let's say I applied for unemployment benefits in June and I received my $600 per week federal booster for 2 whole months. Now, why should someone else who applied in August, presumably, let's say when this policy idea becomes a reality, which it may or may not, but that person now gets unemployment benefits, $600 per week federal booster for 4 months, and then they manage to get a job in August. So this is going to be very, very challenging to implement. Let me be clear about that. However, the underlying idea here, which is that individuals should get unconditional benefits. And by the way, the professor is also an expert on universal basic income. So you can see the hint of that universal basic income philosophy in this proposal. The professor basically believes that these individuals, or the policy idea proposes that these individuals should get the $600 per week booster unconditionally, and it shouldn't be related to their job status. So you can start to see how this sort of blends different ideologies together, but it does serve multiple purposes. It does allow individuals to have more money because this is fundamentally more stimulus, and it also does not take away the incentive to work. In other words, it lifts the disincentive to go back to work, which, by the way, is the number one concern of the Republicans, and many would agree that it is a valid concern. But this proposal essentially is the best of both worlds. Now, implementing this and carrying this off, and I mean, something like this probably should have been done from the beginning. It wasn't. So implementing this, I think, is going to be almost impossible, but it's definitely something that we should be looking at and talking about seriously. So why will this policy idea help individuals or encourage individuals to return back to work faster? Now, there are two aspects to unemployment. There's something called the moral hazard, and there's something called the liquidity effect. Now, what is the moral hazard? The moral hazard is a phenomenon where workers are less likely to return to work because returning to work will make them lose their unemployment benefits. Now, as you can see with this policy idea, the moral hazard is completely eliminated. And then secondly, there is a liquidity effect, which means that if you're off unemployment, you're not making that unemployment revenue. Now, the liquidity effect is quite significant in this post-pandemic world that we live in, because it's not just a normal unemployment, which, by the way, is on an average $371 a week across the country. You know, it's higher in some states and lower in others. But now with the $600 per week federal booster, the liquidity effect is significant. A lot of individuals who are getting their unemployment benefits are getting almost as much as $1,000 a week in unemployment benefits. So there's a significant liquidity component. Now, if an individual wants to continue getting that cash liquidity, that continue getting that close to $1,000 a week unemployment benefit, but on the other hand, they don't want to deal with the moral hazard that, oh my God, I'm going to lose the whole thing if I get a job. That's what this policy idea addresses. This policy idea completely does away with the moral hazard because it blends the best aspects of the liquidity effect, and it takes away the disadvantage, the disincentive, which is, by the way, what the administration and the Republicans are concerned about. It takes away the disincentive associated with the moral hazard, because by nature, the policy idea is unconditional. The policy states that you should continue getting $600 per week for right around 4 months, regardless of whether you get a job or not. So how is this likely to work in the real world? Now, you have to give a lot of credit to the professor, because she did a lot of research, presumably with a large team in this article. And what she did was come up with a simulation of what this was likely to look like. Now, they assumed a 4-month period when they were simulating this policy idea. Now, in case you are wondering why the 4 months was selected for the simulation, the 4-month period was chosen because the Federal Pandemic Unemployment Compensation, or FPUC, which was created by the CARES Act, ends on July 31st, 2020. Now, this is 4 months after the CARES Act was passed. So that duration of 4 months was selected for this very reason. So what would this look like? The way this would work in the real world is that if a worker lost their job, let's just say in June or July 2020, they would be able to collect federal pandemic unemployment insurance for 4 months until September or October 2020, instead of having their benefits cut in the end of July. So you can see that this would be a significant benefit to individuals who file for unemployment. So in a sense, the job loser stimulus program would benefit every individual who filed and who was approved, as long as they were unemployed at the time they did the application, regardless of whether or not they became unemployed in the 4 months after they were approved. So that really is the key part over here. So given the fact that there are over 20 million individuals who are unemployed, given the fact that the true unemployment number may be significantly higher, and given the fact that many of them may or may not get their jobs back, this proposal, this policy idea expects that over 1 million individuals would be able to return to work within 4 months of getting on this program. So in a nutshell, here's what the policy idea is. Moving from the federal pandemic unemployment compensation to the job losers stimulus program would provide more income to workers who lost their jobs during the pandemic through no fault of their own. It would strengthen the much needed stimulus to the economy because people need money in order to pay their rent, in order to buy food, in order to pay their utilities, in order to take care of their children, to cover medical expenses. And this would allow more unemployed individuals to return to work when it is safe to do so. Now again, this is a very complex subject. Again, like I mentioned at the start of this video, this triggers a lot of emotion for all of us, and I completely understand. My position is that individuals who need it the most should be able to get benefits, and those who can return to work should return to work. This policy idea is quite fascinating because it suggests an unconditional benefit to individuals over a set period of time, regardless of whether they get their work, regardless of whether they get employed or not during that period during which they get benefits. This has the added incentive that it will encourage an individual to get back to work, because now they know that that's coming to an end at the end of a certain duration. And that duration, by the way, is fixed for all individuals, as opposed to being something that was sort of set by the government when they introduced the CARES Act back in March. Because when the CARES Act was introduced back in March, and when this deadline of July 31st was set, at that time, everyone who passed the CARES Act thought that, yeah, this is going to be fine. It's going to be over by the end of July. But the truth is, this situation has been going up in some parts of the country and getting better in other parts of the country, which fundamentally means that the deadline, or that the July 31st deadline, is not a fair deadline. It's more than enough for some individuals. It's not enough for other individuals. And it's absolutely unfair for individuals who either never qualified for unemployment benefits or who haven't applied for unemployment benefits yet for some reason or another. I hope you learned something new from watching this training video. I think what you should do is review the entire policy idea. I'll link to it in the description below. If it is something you support, then go ahead and talk to your local representative, go ahead and talk to your local congressperson and tell them that you support this, so we can get some traction going with this idea. I do think it's a good idea. I do think it's a much more fair and much more balanced idea, because we are dealing with a complex problem, and it's a problem that's not very easy to solve. I do appreciate you watching this video. Speaking of a booster, do me a favor and give me a little booster and boost that like button if you learn something new. Also, give me a little bonus. Go ahead and click subscribe and enable notifications below so you get future updates from me. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next training video. Bye.